Hi, welcome to episode 36 of the American Tributaries podcast, where to break out of the bubbles we've all been living in these last few years, we're using modern technology to explore the various currents of people in our great country, kind of like a 21st century Lewis and Clark journey. I'm your host, Michael Whidden, and thank you for joining me in this exploration of America. If you enjoy the podcast, please be sure to spread the word and let your friends and family know on social media. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Sergeant Major Philson Tavernier, who lives in South Carolina and is the post command sergeant major at the U.S. Army Training Center and Fort Jackson in Columbia, the capital of South Carolina. He also happens to be a fellow New Yorker. So Sergeant Major Tavernier and I were connected by Thomas Byrd, who is the public affairs officer at Fort Jackson and was also a guest on the podcast for episode 20. So I should first give a shout out to Tom. Thank you for connecting us. And of course, thank you, Sergeant Major Tavernier, for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing? And could you share a bit of your story?
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening. How are you, Mike? So my name is
All right.
Philson Tavernier, and like you stated, I'm from Queens, New York. I grew up in South Side Jamaica, Queens, a very tough community. And upon graduating from high school, I found myself lacking any clear purpose and direction. I'm first generation military, knew nothing about the military or the U.S. Army. So I walked to the recruiting station, and I simply asked to join. And to be funny, but and actually, when I walked in the recruiting station, the recruiters questioned me and they asked, "Are you serious? What are you doing in here?" Because they didn't realize that I really wanted to join at the time. So I said, "Yes, I do want to join." They asked, "What do you want to do?" I was like, "I don't know. Fire big guns and drive big trucks." And I was like, "Perfect. I got a job for you. You're going to be an infantryman." And it's been 27 years since I enlisted.
Wow. Has it gone? I'm sure it's gone fast.
Yes, it has definitely flown by. So the first few years, probably first 3 to 5 years, that's your first enlistment, and you're just doing what you're told. It's pretty simple being a junior soldier. Do as you're told, be in the right place, be in the right uniform at the right time. But after the first few years, then you start realizing, hey, I could really do this. Maybe I should reenlist and continue serving.
So what made you intrigued by the Army? Like, what led you to go up to that recruiting office and say, I want to enlist?
So what drove me to walk to the recruiting station was the lack of opportunity. So upon graduating from high school, I was an art major. I wanted to pursue a career within graphic designing or within the arts profession. However, I was not financially stable. I just couldn't afford it. I graduated from high school. I did messenger service in the city for about 6 months. So
Oh my God. Did you really?
oh yeah.
Wow.
So
Oh my gosh.
I was one of those guys riding the bikes in the city delivering packages. And after about three close encounters where I almost killed myself because I got caught up by a taxi cab and the other one was by a bus, I realized that if I'm going to risk my life out here, someone's going to benefit from this. So I walked to the recruiting station and I told them, hey, I want to sign. I wanted to serve something greater than myself. At the time, I did not say that. I just wanted to get out of Queens, New York. And it wasn't
Mm.
until after serving for a few years I realized serving in the military gives you a purpose. It's not just a job. Yes, it's a career, but it's also it it it, it keeps you grounded because as you continue moving up the ranks, there are people that are following you. There are people that are inspired by your actions. So it forces you to be grounded and being your natural best every single day.
Yeah. No, what was it pretty clear early on that that the Army was meant for you, or was there a point where it just kind of clicked and you're like, you know what, I get this?
So I've always been physically tough. I've always been active, whether it was playing sports or whatever the case may be. And after enlisting, I realized that hey, this is pretty easy because as a junior soldier, you just have to be physically fit. Because our job as the U.S. Army is to fight and win our nation's war, and it requires you to be physically fit at all times. And fitness was something that's always been important to me. So after my first few years, I realized I could run, I could do push-ups, I could do sit-ups, and every time I took my test, I scored very high. And I realized that that was the as an infantry soldier, that is one of the most important things in being ready to do your job is for being physically fit. And the fact that maintaining my fitness was easy for me. I just continued serving, and as I continued matriculating, moving up the ranks, obviously I inherited more responsibilities.
Now, can you like? I mean, I guess it's I guess when you say the word infantry soldier, a lot of like I guess images come to mind. But just to avoid any kind of assumptions, can you describe maybe I don't know like that maybe the day in the life of an infantry soldier on deployment, like when you're actually out there?
So when I reference infantry soldiers, so infantry soldiers are they're at the tip of the spear. They are the first soldiers to deploy. They're your combat arms soldiers that are on the ground, involved in a kinetic environment, fighting the enemy, closing with and destroying the enemy. A normal day for an infantryman when we're not deployed, we wake up every morning, do a good PT session, which is physical training, whether it's a 5 mile run, whether you go to the gym, whether it's a foot march. And then after you're done with PT, there's breakfast. You do breakfast, we do eat. And then after breakfast, then the day starts. Normally, there's training going on. Either you're going out to the field to practice your battle drills as an infantryman, or you're working in the motor pool to where you're prepping the vehicles that actually transport you to the field. But when you deploy as an infantryman, that is when you truly do your job. So the entire time you're back in garrison, you're back stateside, you're just training and training. As an infantryman, you don't do your job until you deploy. And once you deploy, you're at the tip of the spear. You're on the ground facing the enemy head on.
And the first time, like you, when was your first deployment?
The first time I deployed was in 2001. So that's a great question because I often ask people, where were you located on September 11th, 2001? And September 11th, 2001, I was ready to deploy to Kosovo. It was not a combat mission, but it was a peacekeeping operation. And at the time of the September 11th attack, I had just returned from a dismount patrol in Kosovo. We were down there for 6 months. We just got back from patrol and we saw the aircrafts going through the towers on TV. And at the time,
Oh,
we thought it
wow.
was a movie because myself and the other soldiers, we started laughing like, "Wow, what's going on?" Until later on, we realized that these were live footages. Those were actually happening in New York City. So my first deployment was to Kosovo and during a peacekeeping operation. And then subsequently, I deployed to Iraq in 2006 and then again in 2010.
Wow. And is peacekeeping operation much? I mean, is that? I guess I figure any deployment there's risks, but is a peacekeeping deployment a less risk of like active I don't know firefight or combat versus when you were in Iraq later on, or is there some is it like what's the dangers there and like what do you risk? Because to me one of the things I think if you're comfortable talking about it is I feel like there's a when we talk about the military experience, there's the one part of it, which is actually a lot of it is day to day, just kind of like working office work routine, like what you were describing. But the reality is, like you said, that at the end of the day, you are putting your life on the line. And I always like think if you're comfortable talking about it, it's good for people to hear about what that actually is like because it's serious to be out there when you're a civilian. You're not asked to give up your life for J.P. Morgan or Goldman Sachs. But when you're out there deployed, you are, and it's a huge ask, and there's really no amount of money that can get people to do that. It's got to be because of a higher cause, like you alluded to before.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a huge difference between a peacekeeping operation and an actual combat deployment. But at the end of the day, there's risk to both deployments. So you take, for instance, a peacekeeping operation in Kosovo was mainly to ensure that the locals were in compliance with the rules that were in place. So you had two different tribes that were fighting over land, and our job was to ensure that there was peace throughout their entire time we were there. Now you take a combat operation, you're deploying, and there's an enemy who is trying to kill you. For instance, you take Iraq. The entire time we're in Iraq, they were in a kinetic environment. You have IEDs, which is improvised explosive devices, all throughout the roads. You have the enemy shooting at you, whether it's indirect fire or direct fire. So, in a combat environment, there's a lot of risk. The risk is a lot higher, but there's risk on both sides. Something as simple as a deployment to Kosovo, you're at risk of getting into a vehicle accident because while in Kosovo, the roads are very narrow, and the vehicles we have are a lot larger than the typical vehicles that are found over there. So we have a lot of tactical vehicles. So now you're driving down the roads, and they're narrow roads. You risk the chance of actually rolling over. So that actually happened to me. I'm referencing something that
Ooh.
happened to me back in 2001. So upon arrival in Kosovo, we were doing right sit, left sit, which is it's a it's a the right sit left sit is an opportunity to kind of pick the outgoing unit's brain to understand some of the initiatives that they had accomplished and some of the things that they had done to figure out where do we pick up and where do we continue going. So they would share their best practices, share their lessons learned, and then we would actually soak all that up. So when it was time for us to execute, we knew exactly what we were getting into to try to minimize any gap between the units. So during the right seat, left seat, one of the drivers, I'm not sure exactly what took place, but my vehicle actually rolled off a cliff. It was 75
Ooh.
feet and we had two soldiers injured. And fortunately, I was in that same vehicle, and I just walked away with a few scratches, a few bumps. But that could have been a lot worse. I could have found myself in the hospital. I could have been paralyzed because one of the other soldiers was paralyzed from that incident. So there's
Oh
risk
my God.
at both deployments. But combat, there's imminent risk. The enemy is definitely trying to engage you and trying to kill you.
And I mean, when you're deployed to Iraq, is there ever like a when you was there ever like a safe spot, or like it doesn't make a difference where you were? I mean, because I can't imagine how like on edge you must be all that time living like that.
Yes, there's really no safe spot in Iraq. So what we do is we set up a patrol base to where we have security elements and we're on watch constantly. But there's really no safe place in a combat zone. But one of the things that gives us the confidence to be able to deploy and fight and win our nation's war is the fact that we train relentlessly when we're back here stateside. So one of the things that's really helpful, which I try to explain to some of the young soldiers today, is the training we do in peacetime is going to save your life in combat. Because oftentimes we do a lot of training back here, and the soldiers are wondering, why do we train so much? Why do we train so much? Well, I'm here to tell you, I am here today because of the training I've received, and I was able to deploy in a combat environment and do exactly what I was taught and come back home safely. So the training that we receive daily is what's going to save your life on the battlefield. Yes, there's risk. Yes, there's danger, but we all make it through.
Yeah. Wow. Um, and was there a difference between you said you were deployed to Iraq two different times?
Yes, so I deployed to Iraq in 2006, and then I deployed in 2010. And both locations, it was different locations in Iraq, but they were both in Iraq. I would have to say my first deployment was probably the worst deployment in
Hmm.
2006, where we sustained a lot of casualties. That was probably one of the worst deployments I've ever been on. And then the second
Oh.
deployment was not as kinetic. We did
Mm.
have some casualties, minor casualties, but nothing major.
Oh. I'm sorry that I mean that when you come back from that, is there a time where I guess you get to decompress? So like what happens, after a deployment a combat deployment like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Upon return from deployment, we have what's called the post-deployment period, where everyone receives an opportunity to take a leave. But first, upon arrival, we go through the process of recovery operations, where we receive all of our gear, make sure everyone is accounted for, all equipment's accounted for, and then everyone has an opportunity to go on leave, whether it's 30 days, 15 to 20 days, have an opportunity to kind of decompress, spend some time with the family, and kind of reset. And there's a
Hmm.
period of time to where it is specifically set for recovery operations post deployment. So we all get back, take leave, come back, and just start conditioning ourselves for when and if we have to deploy at a later date.
And how long is it a deployment?
It varies. So there's some
Mm.
deployments that are 6 months. There's some that are 12 months. At the height of the global war on terrorism, units were deploying anywhere from 12 to 15 months. But we still
God.
we still have soldiers that are deploying today, and the deployments vary from 3 months to 6 months to 9 months.
Wow. And so now you are so you're the post command sergeant major for the Fort Jackson U.S. Army Training Center. You're the senior enlisted um person on the for both commands. Is that right?
That is correct. So at Fort Jackson, I am the post command sergeant major, which means I'm the senior enlisted advisor to the commanding general and the senior trainer to all the soldiers at Fort Jackson. And the good thing about Fort Jackson is the Army's reputation is on the line every single day. At Fort Jackson, over 60% of the civilians that enter the U.S. Army comes from Fort Jackson. And back in 2007, I had the opportunity to serve as a drill sergeant. And as a drill sergeant, you have the opportunity to mold and shape the future of our Army because you're receiving soldiers, brand new soldiers brand new civilians that are soon to be
Mm-hmm.
trainees and subsequently soldiers. And you have 10 weeks to shape them and mold them to be the best soldier that they possibly can be.
Mm-hmm.
So here at Fort Jackson, I have an opportunity to inspire drill sergeants because serving as a drill sergeant, I understand what these drill sergeants are going through. So I try to share my message, my experiences with these drill sergeants, so they understand. Yes, this is the most demanding job. Yes, this is the most challenging job, but it's also the most rewarding and most prestigious assignment you're going to have. Because on any given day, you have to step in front of those trainees and you have to impose your will to instill discipline and to inculcate the Army values in those soldiers so they can be the best possible soldier upon graduation.
I mean, I would imagine that like an effective drill sergeant is somebody who leaves their imprint on that soldier for the rest of their life.
Oh yes. These soldiers are never going to forget the drill sergeants. And it's funny you mentioned that. I just had one of my soldiers when I was a drill sergeant reach out to me. That was 13 years ago. And we connected on Facebook. And initially I was hesitant. I'm like, I have no clue who this is. But my
Mm-hmm.
intuition told me to accept the request, and I accepted it. And it was one of my soldiers from basic combat training. And this individual commenced to just tell me about what the interaction was like when I was a drill sergeant, when they were training, and they were very thankful. So it's just moments like that that makes me feel that just makes the job very rewarding. Just to know that a trainee that I trained 14 years ago still appreciated what I did for them.
Yeah. But did you go through Fort Jackson yourself?
No, as an infantryman, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. So at Fort Jackson, that is we have basic combat training, which is all your low density MOSs. So all your non combat MOSs go to Fort Jackson, and all your combat MOSs go to Fort Benning. So your infantrymen and your 19 series, which are armor soldiers, they attend training at Fort Benning. And instead of basic combat training, it is one station unit training, which is called OSIP.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, excuse me. Um, do you have a? I mean, you've had a lot of different assignments in all of your time, other than like the drill sergeant assignment that you had. Do you have any other favorites that you went through?
Just about every assignment has been one of my favorite assignments. I've been
Ah,
very fortunate. I've had some great assignments. So yes, thus far, serving as a drill sergeant was one of my most rewarding assignments. But I think my second rewarding assignment was the opportunity to serve as a garrison sergeant major. So, as a garrison sergeant major, you have the responsibility to synchronize and integrate all the services, all the programs throughout the installation. So, in the civilian sector, you could garrison sergeant majors like the city, the mayor, like
mm,
the mayor of a city, and they have the responsibility to ensure that the fitness facilities, the dining facilities, the mini malls, the emergency services, the gate guards, all those services and programs are synchronized and integrated because your job as a garrison sergeant major is to ensure that you enable the warfighters. So all the soldiers that are on installation, they have to be able to execute the job without any challenges. And that is what you do as a garrison. You provide all those, you enable them to ensure that they can do the job. So yes, that was definitely my second most rewarding assignment. And then the third one is definitely just being here at Fort Jackson because it comes in full circle. So I was once a trainee, I was once a soldier, I went through basic combat training. A few years later, I went back and I was a drill sergeant. And now I'm back at Fort Jackson to where I have an opportunity to inspire those drill sergeants. You get to see
yeah.
the trainees go through, you get to see the drill sergeants how to interact. So it's just those three assignments. If I was to highlight the top three assignments, I would definitely say serving as a drill sergeant, serving as a garrison sergeant major, and it wasn't just serving as a garrison sergeant major, but it was serving as a garrison sergeant major in Germany. So yes, so I had an opportunity to travel the world. Never, never in my dreams did I think I would be stationed in Germany. It took me 20 years, and we were stationed there, and we got there in 2018, and we were there for 2.5 years, and it was definitely a fun assignment, both professionally and personally. Personally, we got to travel to 19 countries. Uh,
Oh my gosh.
oh yeah, and then professionally, it truly gave me an opportunity to grow both personally and professionally. So I talked about what you do as a garrison sergeant major in terms of enabling the warfighters. But then I also had the opportunity to work with civilians for the very first time. So as an infantry soldier, I've never worked with civilians ever. I've always been on the line with infantry soldiers doing infantry jobs. But as a garrison sergeant major, the majority of your organization, probably 80% of your organization, are civilians. So it was a great opportunity.
Yeah. Um, and I guess in maybe the question should be, where didn't you visit when you were in Europe? It sounds like you covered a lot of the countries.
Yes, we didn't have, so we had our dog while we were in Germany. So we tried to go
Hmm.
places that we could drive. So anywhere that
Hmm.
required us flying, we didn't have an opportunity to visit. But we did go to
Hmm.
Greece. We were able to find someone to watch our dog, and we went to Greece. We took a cruise there, and it was a beautiful, beautiful country.
Yeah, that's great. And did you explore the beer culture of Germany?
Well, not necessarily beer, but we definitely indulge in some wine. So
Ah, nice.
it's funny you asked that because alcohol is, I would not say cheap, but inexpensive in Europe in
Hmm.
comparison to the U.S. So that was actually one of our hobbies while we were in Europe. My wife and I decided to collect wine. So we actually we became some amateur wine connoisseurs, and we
Oh,
have
that's great.
yes,
That was my past career. I did that for 12 years.
really.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did wine distribution and importing.
All right. Well, if you ever come to Fort Jackson, or if you're ever in a location where I'm stationed at, maybe I'll have you over the house to try some good wine. You can tell me which one of my bottles is probably the better bottle.
Well, I mean, you were on the ground there. You probably learned a lot more than I did. But so you're a big Riesling fan then?
Actually, more of a Cabernet.
Okay, all right, great.
Uh,
Well, with like the climate change, from like the trend seems to be is that they're growing grapes in Germany that they weren't able to grow before. So I feel like there's going to be more like Pinot Noir and other things coming from Germany. So you might want to kind of get back there for another command, and you can see how the wine scene's changed in Germany.
so it's funny you mentioned that. So there's a unique wine that I learned about in Germany. It's called ice wine. Have you heard of ice wine?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Obviously, the grapes are picked in the wintertime. It happens, I guess, every couple of years where the grapes are frozen and they pick them off and then they smash them. And it's more on the sweeter side, but they're really expensive and they're really good.
Yeah. No, the like when I try to talk to people about like why, I guess, why ice wine is what it is. It's like, picture when you were a little kid and you got the ice pop and you just tried to suck out all the juice and you keep all the ice. That's what happens. That's what ice wine is. And actually, I'm glad we're talking about this, because with Thanksgiving just a couple days away, I always try to tell people that if you're going to entertain people, what you want to do, what like the coup de grace, the exclamation point on any like holiday dinner or any dinner with family and friends, is the dessert wine.
Yes, absolutely. A liqueur or any dessert
Yes.
wine. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But also thinking about this, what I found as the most like the sexiest bottle to have for a dinner party is a Magnum of Riesling, because
Really?
the Magnum bottles of Riesling are like long and slender, and they're also very easy to pour across the table. Like if you have like a Magnum with like a 1.5 liter bottle of like your typical wine, it's a little bit more chunky and a little bit harder to pour. But the Magnum of Riesling is really sleek and sexy, and it just stands up really tall and looks really impressive.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, a big, yeah, it's a and Riesling, to go back just to your experience in Germany, was Riesling is still one of the great undiscovered pleasures, because not everybody is trying to buy Riesling, so the prices are extraordinarily reasonable given what compared to like Pinot Noir, something like a world class Riesling, the everyday person could afford a world class Pinot Noir from Burgundy. No one but the richest people can afford,
Yeah.
as you know. So, so how long is your assignment at Fort Jackson?
So I've been at Fort Jackson for about 2.5 years, and I'm
Okay.
scheduled to change out in March.
Okay.
So typically these assignments, working for general officers, anywhere from 18 to 32 months. So about March
Okay.
time frame, I'll be changing out, and then we'll find out what the Army has in store for me next.
Okay. And when do you find out? Or I guess, how does that work? I guess for civilians who are listening, like there's a rotation, but like, how does that work to find out where you're going to be assigned, or like when do you get a chance to say where you'd like to be assigned?
Yeah, so for the average soldier, there's a marketplace. You get online into a portal, and you look at the assignments that are available, and you select you rack and stack your preference as to what assignment you like. And if there's a vacancy and the gaming unit selects you, then that is where you'll be PCSing to. So typically, you'll find out anywhere from 6 months to 8 months where your next assignment is going to be. But as you move up the ranks, it's a little different. So once you start working for general officer, you have to interview for a job. So your knowledge, skill, and behavior is identified, and they line it with the if any organizations that are becoming vacant or vacant, and then you'll be slated with four of the individuals. So it'll be five of you, and then you'll conduct an interview with the general officer to determine whether you're the right fit for the job.
Okay.
So
So you literally work with just generals at this point when you're an E9,
yes,
correct?
E9.
Okay.
So there are several levels of E9. So you have E9 could be a staff sergeant major, someone that works within the operation, and then you have the command slate, which is a command sergeant major, but you're working at the battalion level. So each of the different levels, the level of responsibility increases, and the number of the personnel within the formation increases as well.
Okay. And so for those different levels, like how many people are we talking about?
So, for instance, you look at a battalion level, which is anywhere from 4 to 600 personnel. And then
Mhm.
once you get to the brigade level, which is the next level above battalion, you're looking at anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 personnel. And then once you get to division level, you're looking at about 20 to 27,000 personnel.
Wow. Wow. Do you come a long way from that kid from Queens?
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes I have to just kind of take a tactical pause and look in the mirror and kind of reflect on the path I've taken. Joining the U.S. Army is the best thing that ever happened to me. And this is not a sales pitch for anyone that is considering enlisting. This is my story. Upon graduation from high school, like I stated earlier, I lacked any clear purpose and direction. And walking to the recruiting station was the best thing that ever happened to me. The opportunities that has been presented to me. I mean, I wanted to go to school before I enlisted. I was not financially stable. Over the 27 years I've been in, I was able to complete my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, all on the U.S. Army's dime. So it's been a great journey. I wouldn't change it for anyone. And yes, I did come a long way because growing up in New York City is tough. It's tough. You have to be you've got to have the individual discipline to make the hard right over the easy wrong every single day. Because every day in New York City is a contested environment. You're exposed to a lot of dark alleys, a lot of rabbit holes, a lot of negative things that you can get yourself into and get yourself in trouble. But you have to have the intestinal fortitude to make the right decisions to stay on the proper trajectory, or you'll find yourself in a bad place.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Um, do you find that, like, when you, like, consider all the folks that come into the army ranks, um do you what are the different kind of motivations? Do you find, are there a lot of people that had like the similar kind of motivation from you? And obviously it's not just limited to people coming from New York City, it could be many other parts of the country. Are there a lot of people who are like kind of you know legacy military kids, sons and daughters of people in the military? Like, what's the breakdown of different of people that come in?
Yeah, it's a broad variety. So a lot of the people that come in because they serve for patriotic reasons, family tradition. Their father served, their grandfather served, and they feel obligated to serve because they feel it's their duty to serve the country. But then you have another population that see the U.S. Army as an opportunity to get away from their homes and to do something different. Some people join to travel, some people join for education, some people join because they want to be affiliated something bigger and greater than themselves, a brotherhood, a sisterhood. So there's a wide variety of reasons why people enlist. But one thing that's for sure, after they enlist, people become loyal to who we are because it's a whole different profession. It's just a different way of life, and you become a member of a team where your brothers and sisters are always going to take care of you, regardless of what the situation is. They're going to be there for you. So I've had a lot of
Yeah.
friends that have served, and they've either retired or PCS, which is when you transition out of the military before 20 years. And they're all doing great. They have good jobs. One of the biggest things they struggle with is the camaraderie, the brotherhood and the sisterhood. It's just not having that there. So a lot of people enlist for several reasons, but once they get in here, you become part of the team, become part of a family, and that's what keeps us serving.
Yeah, the thing that hit me is, and this is part of, I guess like what led me into this journey for this podcast is, like, when you're in the civilian world, you don't see the codependencies as much as you do when you're in the military. And my analogy is, or my experience was with the Navy, but like, you see how everybody's interconnected, and you see how the most junior person in your ranks is can have as much of an impact as the most senior person in your ranks, and you see how everybody is dependent on everybody else. And I think when you're in the civilian world, you get kind of more consumed in your own bubble, and you lose track of the fact that that frankly, like, that person who delivered the food to you, or that person that stocks the grocery shelves, is as important as the lawyer or the high paid banker. But you lose sight of that. And in the military, I think it's more in your face, and it's more part of really the spirit of your existence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone brings something to the table, whether it's the most junior soldier to the most senior officer. Everyone has different perspectives. And I think we as leaders, we have to be open minded and willing to listen to everyone's perspective because
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that you can learn something from anyone, and every single day you should be able and willing to learn something. And when you get to the point where you think you know it all and no one else can teach you anything, I think it's time to probably transition and serve in a different profession because
Yeah.
you have to be a lifelong learner.
Yeah. Yeah, and that touches upon something that, for me, I think it's actually empowering, is when you embrace your humility. Um, and actually, it's funny, we were talking about wine before. When I first started selling wine, it's very overwhelming because you see there's all these books about wine,
Yeah.
right? And there's so much knowledge, and there's endless amounts of wineries and grapes and regions. But when you realize that it's impossible to know it all, it becomes more rewarding because you're not overwhelmed by it. You're humble to be like, I'm always going to be in a position of not knowing enough, and you become a sponge for it instead of being overwhelmed.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're spot on. We experienced that in while we were stationed in Germany. Like
Uh,
we probably had about 100, 200 bottles of wine at the house, and here we are thinking, oh, we have Chianti, we have this, we have that, and every time we go to a different country, it's like, oh, this is a new wine. I'm like, okay, I guess the list just
yeah.
keeps going and going.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have? What are some of the regions that that you enjoyed visiting while you were over there?
So definitely Chianti. We went to Chianti in
Mm,
Italy. Ooh, we also went to Romania and Bulgaria. They have some good wine down there.
yeah,
Um,
a
Croatia.
friend of mine makes wine there.
Yep, we have some bottles from Croatia as well, and then I want to say we have some bottle from gosh, yeah, I can't remember, but we have several bottles.
Okay, yeah. And how big is your wine cellar now?
So my collection is probably about 300 bottles. Yeah, it's
Nice.
slowly diminishing. I came back with probably about 500 bottles, and I'm down to 300. Um,
I
yes,
see a deployment to like maybe to Italy or France. Maybe you need to be up near Paris.
absolutely. It's kind of restock. And you know, the challenge I'm having is I haven't purchased a bottle of wine since I've been back to the States. I just find it I struggle to do it because when we were stationed in Germany, a bottle of wine was probably about 10 euros, a good bottle of wine, which is probably equivalent to, I don't know, 15, 16 bucks back in the States. And now I go to a store to price wines and, I find bottles for about 18, $20. And these are not even great bottles of wine. So I struggle to spend that much money on a bottle of wine when I know when I was in Germany, you can spend something as little as, I don't know, $10 and get you a good bottle of wine.
Yeah, you get a little spoiled over
I know. And now it's back
there.
to reality.
Yeah, yeah, but it's still worth it. I think I don't know how the wine shop scene in in Colombia, but in New York there's certainly plenty. And I think if you can find a good wine merchant, they'll take good care of you. And I think as long as you either steer away from the biggest name brands or the biggest branded regions, you can get some really good value still. So we can we'll talk offline.
No, absolutely.
so but I guess you were also in South Korea, weren't you?
Yes. So I was stationed in South Korea in 2003. And that was definitely an experience because I had the opportunity to truly embrace and understand the Korean culture, which is very unique. And a lot of things we take for granted in the U.S. You quickly realize that it is a big deal when you get to a different country. So, for instance, something as simple as personal space. Like in Korea, there's no such thing as personal space. I mean, you're commuting on public transportation, and people are in your face. I mean, people are standing there holding the bars in the train, their armpits are in your face, and it's totally acceptable. That is just who they are. In New
Yeah.
York City, yes, some of the trains get packed, but that's not it's not normal, right? If the train is unpacked, we
Yeah.
try to distance ourselves. But it was a great experience. I had an opportunity to train with the Korean Army over there, and got to learn a lot about the culture.
How long were you assigned there again?
So I was there for 12 months. I was there from 2003 to 2004.
Okay.
Just that was right around the time that we actually invaded Iraq in 2003. So I did my 12 months, and I was anxious to return back
Hmm.
to the States.
Yeah. The I remember because I was stationed in Japan, and I remember the first time that I was in was in Seoul. It was interesting to see like the differences in like in Asian cultures because like what I found at least was my experience was the subways in Tokyo would definitely get packed. But it was a lot more peaceful packing, whereas like when you're in Seoul, the subways felt more. It was packed like Tokyo, but it was more aggressive like New York City.
Yes. And another difference too is the cleanliness between the two countries. So Japan is extremely clean. So I had the opportunity to go to Kyoto and Osaka, Japan, and similar cultures, but it's just their level of pride. It's a whole different level. Every single day they were cleaning teams out there sweeping the streets. I mean, you couldn't find any trash on the roads, just none at all.
Yeah. It's like one big army base.
Yeah.
Because I remember even like being like, you'd get off the Yokosuka Naval Base, and like you couldn't nobody crosses the street at the crosswalk unless you're allowed to, and it just seemed so unnatural as a New Yorker, especially to be like, you mean people don't cross just because there's no traffic and
So
so
it's funny you mentioned that Japan is as clean as a military installation or like an army post because something that simple is what I try to drive through the heads of some of our subordinate leaders. Because here at Fort Jackson, the Army's reputation is on the line every single day. Every Wednesday and Thursday, we have anywhere from 5 to 8,000 families that are visiting for Family Day, which is the day before graduation. And then on Thursday, which is graduation day, all the trainees are graduating. So you have anywhere from 800 to 1,200 soldiers that are graduating, 5 to 8,000 families that are visiting, and that is the very first time on an Army post. And I want to ensure that when they transition off of Fort Jackson, it's a good memory. They came on an installation that was clean. The leaders and the soldiers at Fort Jackson were professionals, and they enjoyed their stay. And that's why I'm always harping on these leaders. Like, we have to ensure that we're being good stewards of our profession. We have to clean up after ourselves. You might be tasked to police up, which is pick up trash throughout the installation, and you may see it as a daunting task, but you won't realize the impact that your efforts are having on the families and all the civilians that are visiting Fort Jackson. Because exactly what you just said, because Army posts are clean, but they don't see that side of it. All they know is I've been tasked to pick up trash. Well, it's a
Yeah,
lot more.
no, big.
It's a lot more than trash. It's the first impression and the last impression that we're having on the American society.
Yeah. Um I was there in Fort Jackson for a family day with my daughter and three other kids from the high schools from the New York City area at the very beginning of August. And that was such a powerful ceremony that you guys put on. And I think I guess so much so that like my daughter, who had never been on a military base before, said that it was probably the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. And I say that more because I think what I think that speaks to is the fact that you're really kind of conveying a spirit that is that's not like it's not specific. Like you were kind of you were saying something kind of universal, communicating something universal about what was going on there. You don't The way I describe it is like say we'll go to wine, right? Like to me a great wine is a wine that somebody doesn't need to explain to you. Kind of like how the Eiffel Tower is impressive. You don't need to be an architect to appreciate the Eiffel Tower. And what I'd say with this is that ceremony, there's something universal about it because you don't need to be vested. My daughter has no connection to the military. The kids that were with me had no connection to the military, yet that ceremony spoke to something really profound and universal to them. So whatever you're doing was very effective.
So, what year was that you visited Fort Jackson?
Oh, just this past summer.
Oh, really? Okay, I was going to say
Yeah.
you need to come back, but
I think you were away, and like if my project is successful, we hopefully will get to meet before you transition to your
absolutely.
next assignment.
Well, just know that you and your team are always welcome to Fort Jackson. So that's one of our current initiatives here with General Kelly is reconnecting the Army with our community. Um, for the longest, especially throughout COVID-19, we kind of closed our gates and kind of just did our own thing on the inside. And we want to get away from that and reconnect and make sure everyone understands that we're your Army, we're there for you, and everyone's welcome on the installation. So you understand what we're doing with the youngest generations that are coming through the training.
Yeah, yeah, and I think to me the reason why I want to go on there, as I alluded to before, is just to understand the military community and how the commonalities that we have and the differences, and just kind of take it for what it is. Because with anything, we're bombarded with so many things in our lives that you kind of make snap judgments, and you get certain specific information and no other versions of it. And like with the Army, the only time a New Yorker ever really encounters the Army is when you read about them doing their job in combat, which is not a good association. Like it's unpleasant, it's necessary, but unpleasant. Or there's something that went wrong that is, the paper is piling up on. They don't hear about the everyday experience. So it's been great to talk to you to let people get a little bit of an idea of like kind of like the everyday soldier experience, and also just seeing what we saw on that base.
Absolutely.
So have you been back to New York recently?
I feel bad, but I haven't in a while. The last time I went home was in 2018, Christmas
Ah,
2018. My wife and I
okay.
we went to Queens to visit my dad because my dad still lives in New York City. He works in the
Okay.
city, lives in Queens. But I am due for a visit. I think it's time for me to return home and visit my dad, and still have a lot of friends throughout New York. So I feel bad for saying no, but it's been a while.
Oh, and things get busy. I know when I was in Japan, I never actually came back because it was like so much to travel and so much to see and so many responsibilities that you just can't tear yourself away.
And
So,
it's
um,
just, so it's funny you say it. So you can relate, and I try to explain that to people, and they just don't get it. It's like I just can't stop and come home on vacation. There's so many responsibilities we have. There's training going on. There's different things going on. It's hard to explain. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's good when I'm talking to someone that has served or can
Mm,
relate and understand. Like there are some challenges. We can't just take leave any given time. There are training events that are going on. There's responsibilities, and you have to be present.
yeah. Well, the other thing which I'm sensing from you is um what I was a lawyer before I was in wine, and being a lawyer was a job, and it was a challenging job. It was a well paid job, but not well paid enough for me to work 100-hour weeks, and not enough meaning behind it to justify doing it for me. With wine, I really enjoyed working in wine for 12 years, and so much so that I never really looked to take vacation because I actually liked it. um and my wife would be like, hey, I want to we should plan for vacation. I was like, why? Like, I don't need vacation to get away from work. I need vacation for my own psyche. I need vacation for my family's sake, but I didn't need vacation to get away from work. And it sounds like that's another challenge for you. Is it seems like you love what you're doing, which is a privilege, I'm sure, in many respects.
Yes, absolutely, and that's what keeps me serving. Is just the passion for what you do, understanding the impact that you have on the lives of the soldiers that you're responsible for. And
Yeah.
we often talk about that. We talk about spiritual readiness to some of our youngest trainees that come to training, because when we talk about spiritual readiness, it's knowing your why, it's knowing your purpose, your reason for existence, what drives you every day, what drove you to enlist, and what keeps you serving the U.S. Army. So I absolutely agree. It's about that passion and knowing your purpose and your why. So that's it's
Yeah.
definitely it's just even when I do take leave, I miss the job, because then I'm wondering, I'm like, what's not happened? It's not that I don't trust the leaders that are back here. It's just you feel like you're obligated to be there to ensure that you have a present and you're there in the event that someone needs you. Because the last thing I need is for something bad to happen, and I could have been present and I could have prevented it. It's just knowing the responsibilities that you have, and you have to be there at all times.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
how I feel sometimes. But that's not the case. We have
uh,
enough leaders to allow me to take leave.
yeah.
It's because I feel like I need to be there, but it's okay. It's because I
Yeah.
love what I do.
That's great. All right. Well, I know you've got some. I'm sure dinner's on the stove. I'm sure for you. Um, but I guess before we wrap up, can I ask, like, what gives you hope at the end of the day?
What gives me hope is this job right here. Being the post command sergeant major of Fort Jackson, seeing the new generation of soldiers come through the gates of Fort Jackson on day one. They can't tie their shoe. They can't do anything. And after 10 weeks, these soldiers are confident, um, they're respectful, and they walk, they just walk a lot taller. And I'm like, wow, okay, I guess we're doing this right. That gives me hope. That lets me know that the freedoms and the liberties that we all enjoy today are going to continue to be protected, because we have new generation of soldiers that are stepping up. And you know what? These soldiers are smarter than I was when I went through. They're stronger and they're faster, and a lot of them are a lot better looking than I am. So that's what gives me hope, is seeing the new generation of soldiers come through the gate, and knowing that when it's time for me to retire, I'll be able to enjoy the freedoms and the liberties that we all continue to fight for.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that.
No,
All right.
absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. It has truly been an honor to sit here and talk with you. Like I stated, this is my first podcast, so I appreciate the opportunity. I see this as an opportunity to practice for future podcasts. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be first of many. I'm honored to be your first. So thank you very much. And I guess and thank you to all listeners out there. May you go out and explore our country with curiosity, respect, compassion, and humility. All right. Thank you. Take care.
All right, you have a good evening.
All right. You too.